Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Noraini Abdul Wahab. I'm a senior counsellor at Club HEAL. I belong to the community intervention team. What we do is we do psychological interventions for anyone who suspects that they have mental conditions or someone who has gone through the typical treatment at the hospitals. Right. I've been in the community for about 10 years and I've been doing counselling, specifically clinical counselling, for the past 5 years. Okay, so I think all of us have experienced feeling low. So I think whenever we tell somebody that alah, aku tengah depressed kan, or I think I'm feeling depressed, what we are saying is that we are feeling very low mood, which means that we have difficulty working up the energy to do much, and then we are feeling very downhearted. I think there's that feeling within our heart where there's this, there's this tightness, and then there's this emptiness, and it feels hollow and dark and stuff like that. So I think that is what we commonly relate to being depressed or being sad, right? But what is the mental illness level of being sad, right? So basically, if we are sad about Singapore losing in a soccer match, right? So that's feeling sad, right? So we may cry if we the Singapore Lions lose a match or something, but it's not going to affect us for 2 weeks, right? If we are still sad about something for 2 weeks or more, then we may not be experiencing just sadness. It may be something else, right? So if we look behind the reason why we were sad, if it's something that we lose out, like something we lost, so like losing your handphone and losing all the contacts in your handphone and losing all your threads in your WhatsApp or your Telegram or whatever, feeling the loss of something valuable, right, then that's maybe not just sadness, maybe that's grief. So when you first lose something, if you lose your bag or you lose your passport, or you lose something valuable, then the first reaction to grief would be shock and numbness. So in the beginning, the first 1 week, maybe you don't feel so sad, but you notice yourself getting angry on the second week, and then you start feeling physical reactions. Your diet starts getting affected, your sleep gets affected, and you notice yourself thinking about it a bit more. And then that means that you are possibly in the second stage of sadness or grief. So what are grief stages like? So the first stage would be you feel shocked, you feel numb, you don't feel anything, you are still very productive. But the second week following that is that you experience some form of bargaining. Like you start ruminating, like you think like, what if I didn't do this? What if I had done that instead? You start bargaining. If I had done something else, if I had said something else might have happened. I would not have gone through this loss. And that's the bargaining stage. And then you start blaming. After you have finished bargaining what you did wrong, you start blaming someone else. Like, oh, that person is the one who caused this to happen. That person is the one, somebody else is responsible for this. After you go through that stage, then maybe you might get angry with yourself, with everybody, with the world, with the whole qadar for letting you lose something valuable. And then you start feeling sad because you realize that there's nothing that you can do about it, there's nothing that anybody can do about it. It has happened and you have lost, right? Once you have passed sadness, and then you go into the stage of acceptance, then you realize that, okay, there's really nothing you can do about it. You are done feeling so sad, you're done feeling, so downhearted. You're done having your life affected by this loss. Then you come to acceptance and you move on, right? So these are the stages of grief. So we don't call grief a mental illness. It's a normal state. And grief can last, so in Islam, we accept that grief has got a qadr on it, a time frame to it, and that's 4 months. So in psychology, between 4 to 6 months, we call it adjustment disorder maybe. So you are experiencing adjustment. So a disorder in adjustment would be you are throwing tantrums. So you're throwing things around the house. So that's not very normal lah, right? And you are isolating yourself more than usual, right? So then we call that adjustment disorder lah. But that would last between 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 months, sorry. So if you go through this stage, this sadness and anger and downheartedness, and your sleep is affected, and you lose weight or you gain weight suddenly, you know, or you sleep more, and you cannot do anything. You find that for even after 6 months, you cannot focus on your job. Your mind just keeps going back to that loss. Then maybe you are experiencing some form of depression. Then it possibly is an illness that you really need to get help with. Actually, clinicians would, I mean, if you go by the DSM lah, it's a prolonged sadness which affects your life and you cannot function for 2 weeks or more, and that would actually already qualify lah. But of course, there are other conditions. You have to really be rock bottom and then cannot function for more than 2 weeks. Then it's depression, right? Because normally, like I said, if you are sad about a soccer match or something, you can overcome it lah. But other than that, if it's really something huge, then it's prolonged sadness. Then it may be depression because the cause may not be in the present moment. It may be something called complex grief, which is, you know, you experience grief and then grief and grief and grief, you know. So it's a whole volcano of sadness over and over again lah. So that is what we consider as depression. The similarity between bipolar and depression is that in bipolar, the state would be called manic depression. That means, like I mentioned before, it's a form of depression where you cannot function, where you lose functionality. That means in that state of depression, they really cannot even get out of bed. Or if they get out of bed, they're unproductive. They just cannot function normally. And then the stage that follows that manic depression would be an euphoric state. So it's a state where the person is just very overly productive. They don't sleep. They can do a lot of things. So it's a state where they are very excitable. They are very overly functioning. So it follows each other. So you come from a state where you cannot function, and then suddenly you're overly functioning, something like that. So that is bipolar. So just because a person is crying one moment and then laughing the next moment, that may not be bipolar lah. It has to be a certain time frame that follows each other, and then in between there's possibly a period of lull where you know, where the person functions normally. Even to diagnose bipolar, you really need a physician. You really need to go to a psychiatrist to get diagnosed for bipolar. So we cannot just say anyhow lah, people ni bipolar ni. That's not fair lah. Yeah, definitely. So if you are a functioning adult, you are a high functioning adult, which is what most of our millennials are, right? I mean, anybody who has been raised in Singapore, especially, has gone through a system where we are just programmed to be high functioning. So even when we are sick, we have fever, we still go to work. That is a typical Singaporean, right? So before the COVID, Singaporeans would go to work with flu and cough, right? Because we're just so high functioning. So it is possible that we are experiencing depression, low-heartedness, we're feeling we don't want to do the work, but we just turn up for work and we still do the job, right? So it's possible that we have depression, but we are not aware. So how do we know we are having depression? It's when you have a sense of meaningless. You feel that life is meaningless, you are meaningless, you feel that you are unworthy, you feel that the sadness goes deeper into your soul, you are affected in a very deeper level, and you go through the motions of life just doing stuff without being there. You're not passionate about anything. You don't have the enthusiasm really. You're not really happy. You don't experience positive emotions, but you're just doing stuff, just for the sake of doing, or because it's your role to do, Yeah, so that may be some form of depression that you are going through, because a normal, healthy adult would be able to feel positive emotions. We would have the heart feeling light, and we will have the heart feeling open, So if you don't have that for a prolonged period of time, then you may be experiencing depression. So if you are going through a difficult period, or you have gone through some form of loss, maybe to other people, like you rationalize and you will say that other people don't see this as a trauma, but you feel very affected by something. And then you go through a period where you stop forgiving yourself, and you are constantly guilty. And then you start blaming yourself. And then you start labeling yourself with names. You're calling yourself names. In your mind, you're not speaking this, but in your mind, you're using words that you would never use on other people. And it just brings you deeper and deeper into this state where you just feel miserable. You feel very lost, like you don't know whether you will ever come out of this state where you hate yourself, or you feel that you're unlovable or unworthy of anything good. And you notice that you are eating less. You notice that you are sleeping less. You notice that you're waking up at every other hour. And when you are at work, or when you are at home and you are doing work that you normally do, you find that your mind, that your heart is not there. You don't take pleasure in work, and you feel like everything is pointless. You know that this is what you're supposed to do, and you're doing it. You know there's nothing really wrong with the way you're functioning, but you know something is not right. And it's prolonged. You're experiencing this more than 2 weeks. And then it goes into a month, and then it goes into 2 months, then 3 months, and then you notice that you cannot remember when was the last time you actually enjoyed yourself. You cannot remember what are the good things about yourself. And then you cannot remember who you are. You forget what are the positive characteristics that you have. Yeah, then I think I really highly recommend that you approach someone and let them know. Okay, so children normally should not have depression, because children are very in the moment. They accept things as it is. They don't have the mental capacity to actually dwell on things. So if a child does not get the ice cream, and they're sad about it and they're upset about it, and then you bring them to the playground and then they're so happy about it. So that's not bipolar, okay, by the way. That is just a child being a child and being in the moment and enjoying life as it is. And they're very fluid. Children are very fluid with emotions. So children's emotions are actually very attuned to the situation, right? Then if you notice that your child is not experiencing joy, like they have difficulty having positive emotions, and you notice them speaking badly about themselves. So they say things like, things that put themselves down. And that's not normal for children, because children generally like themselves. And then you notice that their sleep is disrupted sleep, and they are eating less. So it's more or less the same with what an adult might experience, but with children, you will see them like, dazing. They cannot focus in class. They isolate themselves from their friends because they don't know how to recognize this, right? And they don't know how to communicate their sadness, right? So if it goes on for more than 2 weeks, they need intervention. So look for grief, look for traumas, look for grief, look for anything that the child might have experienced where it may have affected the child on an esteem level. When you notice your child, being different from the way they were. So, you see, if a child is naturally introverted, memang dia tak suka campur orang, right? And they are very shy. So, it's normal lah for them to not want to mix with other children. But if you see a sudden change in the way they are behaving, then that is something of concern. So, what do? As parents, we are the first line. We are their frontliners, right? And they should trust us. I mean, if we have had a healthy relationship with our child, we are not an overly controlling parent. If we have not been very harsh on our children, if we are a parent with a healthy relationship with our child, then the child should be able to talk to us, and we can ask them what's going on, what has happened, and so be there for the child. So be there at their level, speak their language, right? But if we have been a critical parent, okay, we have not been so available for our child, okay, at this point, don't blame yourself, right? Take a step back, no need to blame yourself now because the situation is already, critical lah. So, at a time like this, go and seek help. So, let the teachers know. Let the teacher know that, and ask the teacher if, like say, they experience, they notice the child having difficulties in school, and then ask the teacher to make a referral to the school counsellor, right? And then we might want to also go to the FSC and ask for tips on parenting, because parents really are the frontliners to their child's life. If we do not have a good relationship with the child, it affects them all the way into their adulthood. And as psychologists or as counsellors, we do a lot of tracing back and then trying to help them overcome that trauma of living in a household where our parents were not there for us. Right. So if you are a parent who has not been there for your child, please don't blame yourself right now. But just take it as it is, and then, right now, right in the here and now, be there for the child lah, and apologize. Okay. And children, they need hugs. They need physical touch to know that they are accepted. So they need words of affirmation. So being there, having a physical relationship. I mean, like, if your child is below 12, hug them. They can sit on your lap. It's fine. And give them affirmation. So if you're a father and you have daughters, and maybe you are a bit, not comfortable with hugging your daughter or something, give them affirmation. Tell them Tell your child that, she's beautiful, she's perfect as she is. Give her affirmations. Tell her what are the characteristics that are valuable in her. As a father, you are your daughter's first hero. And we know girls tend to be more sensitive as they grow up, right? So fathers really need to be there for their daughters and tell them how strong you feel they are and how courageous they are. Girls need to hear this from parents. And if you have a son, then your role would be to strengthen him, strengthen his esteem, because we want our boys to grow up to be good men who can be responsible, men who can, who can be strong for people around them, right? Okay, certain illnesses will give you, will cause a imbalance in the chemical, in the bloodstreams lah. So certain illnesses like kidney failure is one, because the toxin within the body cannot be flushed out by itself, right? So what happens is that it will go back into the body. And then there's hormonal imbalance, PMS, right? Hormonal imbalance is also something that will affect the mood. So these are physical illnesses which affects your mood and your mental capacity lah, kan? Your mental health. So what happens when your mood is affected? Your capacity to be fluid, to adjust would be affected. So if you, any lady can tell you lah that when you are hormonal and you miss the bus, for example, you can cry for no reason just because you miss the bus, right? So that is something hormonal lah. That's something from your chemical balances and stuff like that. When does mental health affects your physical health? It's when you know that it has something to do with the way you think about yourself, the way you judge yourself. So when you have a sentence in your head and you say like, yelah memang aku macam gini lah, memang orang selalu victimize aku. You are always feeling that people are victimizing you and you feel that nobody likes you and things like that. And then you get a physical reaction and then you get a headache, and then you feel so flushed out, like you feel so tired suddenly, just from having thoughts like that. You know that it's your mental condition giving you a physical condition. So thoughts can actually affect the way you digest. So thinking a certain way can actually give you a headache, give you stomach ache, give you palpitations. Your heart suddenly start beating. You are sweating for no reason. You actually can tremble for no reason. Actually, the reason is the way you think about yourself lah. So that's the difference. When you have a physical condition affecting your mood, and then you have the psychological condition which affects your physical health. Yeah. How long does depression last? It lasts as long as you are not doing anything to get out of it, right? So if you are holding it, you're holding the depression, you continue ruminating and you continue just sitting on it without doing anything about it, that's as long as it lasts lah. It will continue in that manner. In fact, it will actually progressively become something else. If you don't do anything about your depression, it will morph into something else. So whether it's a physical illness that you will experience afterwards, or it will be a more chronic state of mental illness, right? The reason is because the chemicals that has to do with depression will actually eat into your organs, right? So it will progress into something else. Okay, so if you don't want to seek help from professionals, possibly because you don't trust them, possibly because you're afraid that they may judge you, or maybe you're just shy, right? And just the thought of seeing a professional makes you more nervous. Okay, so what can you do first? I will just introduce something that is already in Islam, right? And this is what we call the maqasid syar'iyyah. So the maqasid is something that protects or preserves our dignity and our well-being. So we have been taught that these are actually the domains of our life that we need to pay attention to, so that we maintain dignity and we maintain well-being. Right, so the first thing in the maqasid would be hifzuddin. So to protect and to preserve your spirituality and your capacity to acknowledge and recognize that there is a higher power, that there is Allah, and Allah controls everything within our senses. And to understand that we are always in the rahmah of Allah. And rahmah is Allah's unconditional love. So to preserve and to protect this connection that you have would be to reconnect to Allah. So what we do is we find solace, we find comfort in knowing that whatever that we are going through right now is our curriculum or our course in the betterment of ourselves in the journey of life, and that we are nothing but servants. We are nothing more than a servant of Allah, and our job on this earth is to do and to be us in the best way that we can. So to look at what Allah has given us in our characteristics. So we are different, we are special. We are different from everybody else, and we have a specific purpose on this earth. And how do we live that purpose is by being us, truly. So that characteristic of us being an empath, or a person who is courageous, or a person who is extroverted, or look for our characteristic and be us, and know that when we are fully ourselves, we are a servant of Allah in the best of our capacity. So in hifzun nafs, which comes after hifzuddin. So hifzuddin is to reconnect to our connection with Allah, and through the various means of salat and fasting and helping others in charity, and all the other ibadats. These are things which reconnects us to the higher purpose. The second one is hifzun nafs, to know that our soul is valuable, and to protect the soul, right? So basically we do not kill ourselves when we are depressed, right? Because we go back to preserving the sanctity of the soul, and we go back into knowing that the soul has a purpose, and we want to live the soul's purpose and journey with the soul through this world, and through the difficulties that are in this earth. So take life and take the difficulties that we are going through as a curriculum. Next, we look at Hifzul Nasl. So Hifzul Nasl is where we look at the support system that we have. So to reconnect to family members, to strengthen the family ties. If we say that we have toxic family members, right? Then connect to people in the society. Find social support. So we have relatives, we have friends, right? So find that support. If you cannot get it from your family, then strengthen it somehow, right? And then you go into Hifzul Aql, right? So Hifzul Aql is the preservation of your intellect. So what we do here is we increase our knowledge. We go and find things that we don't know. Why are we going through this? Why are we in this misery? Is because we have expectations that we cannot meet. So when you have expectations and you are falling below your expectations, or you don't have the capacity and the capability to go get what you want, you would experience some form of loss. So getting the knowledge to find your way. So that's where we go into preserving our intellect, preserving our knowledge. And the other thing would be Hifzul Mal. So when we are looking into the domain of Hifzul Mal, we are looking at your productivity in being able to earn a living, your productivity in being able to sustain a life, to protect and to preserve your property, right? So the things that we do for productivity's sake, even when we don't feel like it, it will help us at some point. So to go through life, being a servant of Allah and accepting that life is not easy. This is our course in life. Life is a journey. So basically, when we have not been sleeping properly, we have not been eating properly, we will have physical reactions to our wellness lah. Our state of wellness will be affected. So normally we would go to the doctor a bit more often. We will be taking MCs lah because we don't want to go to work lah, right? So there is probably the best place for you to start. So tell your doctor that actually maybe the third time you're going to the doctor in 2 weeks and then trying to get MC. Normally the doctor will ask you lah what is going on. But if the doctor doesn't ask, then maybe tell the doctor. So it's always a good idea to go to the same doctor. If you can establish a relationship and get yourself a family doctor, So this is a doctor who meets all your other family members, right? So that doctor will be able to identify and recognize that you are actually undergoing mental health stresses, or you're undergoing depression lah. So your GP is possibly your best and first touch base lah for your mental health issues. Or if, like, say, you prefer going to the polyclinic, okay, and because polyclinic you don't get the same doctor all the time. If this is like the third time you're going for an MC in 2 weeks, then you can just let the attending physician know that this is actually the third time actually you are undergoing a lot of stresses. The boss is shouting at you, you have been humiliated by somebody. So let the doctor know that actually your physical illness has got something to do with something that you just experienced. Okay. The other thing is, if you are not working, maybe but you know that you know, you are experiencing a lot of stresses, your mood has been really low and you have no motivation to do anything, and you've been like this for more than a week or 2 weeks, and you want to get help, then you can go to the Family Service Centre, or you can just call us at Club HEAL. And you can also let somebody know at your nearest mosque. I mean, that is where we find social guidance and inspiration anyway, right? Yeah, so let somebody know lah. Even if, like, say you are too shy to go to the FSC or something, let your neighbour know lah. Or somebody close to you. Let them know that, I'm experiencing this for 2 weeks. Aku tak boleh gerak, aku tak boleh bangun, aku macam tak ada motivation, you know, nak buat apa-apa. Homework pun tak buat, you know, assignments pun terlepas. Let somebody know and then tell them, you know, you need help. So maybe, you know, they can bring you, they can come with you, or they can make the call for you, you know. Yeah. So these are the different ways that you can get help lah. Suicidal thoughts are actually not something we come up with by ourselves. Thoughts of suicide, or, you know, thoughts, sentences in our brain that says that dah lah, cukup lah, mati lagi bagus, you know, or sentence similar to this lah. Okay, this is not normal, this is not something we cook up ourselves, because the soul is something that wants to preserve itself, and the human body in its natural condition will want to survive, right? That's why we get you know, anxiety and panic attacks and all, because the body wants to survive. So it's not normal when we have thoughts of suicide. So the moment you notice yourself playing scenarios in your head about dying, or you have sentences in your brain telling you that, you know, it's best to die, that is the point where you need to go and see somebody. At that point, go to the nearest A&E, whichever that is closest to your home, and tell the doctors, I'm having suicidal thoughts, right? Because that means that you have reached a certain level where it's no longer normal. It's not natural anymore, right? It's natural to feel grief, but having suicidal thoughts is a point where you need help. Okay, so that's one. So that is an extreme condition lah. Okay, but don't wait until you have suicidal thoughts then go to the doctor. Okay, instead, when you notice yourself, I mean, especially as Singaporeans lah, we are very productive, we're very kiasu, right? We need to do things. So it's best to go and seek treatment early. Early treatment is always the best. So when it's, you know, if you have just experienced something traumatic, within 1 or 2 weeks, you can see somebody, InsyaAllah, it will be resolved, you know, within a year lah, if the trauma is really bad, right? InsyaAllah, you can come through it. But if you have been having depression for some time and you didn't know, you like, you know, watching this video, then suddenly you realise, alamak, I think I've been having depression for the past 6 years, 7 years ke apa kan, then go and seek help. Go and call someone. If you don't think you are physically affected by it, but it's just the thoughts, and you know, you have negative self-esteem, or you know, you just don't like yourself, right? You look in the mirror and you avoid mirrors or something, you know, you've been avoiding mirrors for the past 2-3 years, go and tell somebody, okay? Because all these are interventions that we can, you know, we can do for ourselves. This is us helping ourselves. This is hifzun nafs. Come forth and let somebody know. Call us at Club HEAL. Call Darul Makmur.